Did you know that vaccines save about 2.5 million deaths per year? After lots of research, I have no doubt that this fact is true. For those of you who have been vaccinated, without even realizing it, those vaccines have saved your life. The history of anti-vaccination, how vaccination lost and regained its credibility today, and the effects of not vaccinating have all allowed many to come to the conclusion that everyone should be vaccinated. Unfortunately, the anti-vaccination claims started when vaccination itself began. There have always been people who refuse to vaccinate their children or themselves. Vaccination, however, began in the early 1800s with Edward Jenner. After lots and lots of research and a huge outbreak of smallpox, Jenner concluded that if you infected a child with cowpox, that child would not obtain smallpox. While this medical discovery was phenomenal for his time, many people disapproved and immediately began judging it. The critical reasoning included sanitary, religious, scientific, etc. reasons. The people who followed the sanitary issues believed that the sharing of needles was unethical and harmful, while those of religious reasoning thought that vaccination was unchristian because it originated from animals. The first major outbreak of anti-vaccination began when the Vaccination Act of 1853 made it mandatory for every child under the age of 3 months to be vaccinated. Another act passed in 1867 that required every child up to the age of 14 years be vaccinated. And this act also included punishments if the parent failed to do so. Protesters of the law complained that this denied them the right to make decisions about their own bodies or their child's. Many protests and rallies began. A local English newspaper even said that 2 men and 1 woman would prefer to offer themselves to the police rather than vaccinate their children. The town of Leicester, England, was a particularly popular spot for protesters to host their rallies. The Leicester demonstration march of 1885 was one of the most infamous rallies in anti-vaccination history. It included somewhere between 80 to 100,000 people. This led to a thorough study of vaccination that forced the Vaccination Act of 1898, which discharged the punishments for failing to get your child an immunization and also allowed the parent to decide if the vaccine was safe and adequate. All of the above information according to the History of Anti-Vaccination website. All of this, however, was just the beginning of modern-day doubt in vaccination. In February of 1998, a paper was written by Andrew Wakefield. This paper, published by Lancet, suggested that the measles, mumps, and rubella (MMR) vaccine caused autism. This paper explored the cases of 12 young children who had suffered the side effects from the MMR vaccine. The side effects included chronic enterocolitis, inflammatory bowel disease, and behavioral disorders. The distribution of this paper plunged the rates of vaccination in the UK, which eventually set the anti-vaccination movement into motion in the United States. According to Ziv, the paper was later found to be fraudulent, and the investigators of the paper found many issues. The first problem was the small number of people they used to attempt to prove their claim. They also used a selective group, whereas they claimed it was consecutive. Among many other things, the authors also picked and chose data that directly related to their assertion, which, according to Rayo and Andrade, resulted in invalid facts. Wakefield, however, would argue that they merely reported the parents' description of what happened to their children in the clinical findings. Ziv also says that Wakefield claimed that they, quote, made no claims about the vaccine causing autism. In fact, we said this does not prove an association. All we urged was further research, end quote. Even with Wakefield's credibility crumbling, parents continued to believe the allegation and neglected from vaccinating their children, which only brought about more risk for the child to contract the disease, or a much more serious disease. There are many risks that come with not vaccinating yourself or your child. According to the Harm of Skipping or Delaying article, not vaccinating your child can make your child much, much more susceptible to many diseases such as measles, whooping cough, pertussis, mumps, and many more. Recently, because of anti-vaxxers, there's been a measles outbreak, the worst in 20 years. There was reportedly 84 cases in 14 states, says Salzberg. Obviously, all of these diseases have proven to lead to death. Death is not the only preventable endangerment that comes with non-vaccination. Bringing a child or yourself to the doctor's office who has not been immunized makes it more difficult for the doctor to treat the patient. The treatment for an unvaccinated person can be uncommon to a doctor who's used to treating vaccinating children. An unimmunized pregnant woman also becomes much more likely to develop diseases, which often lead to complications in their pregnancies that have lasting effects on their baby. Lastly, not vaccinating your child can put others around you at risk. Some persons with compromised immune systems, such as leukemia, are not able to receive vaccines. These people often depend on those around them to be vaccinated, so that the chances of them contracting a then life-threatening disease greatly decreases. Besides bodily side effects, there are also social consequences. Some illnesses that an unvaccinated person may obtain may demand a child be removed from a school system or even quarantined. This would separate the person from friends and family for an extended period of time that can have lasting effects on a person. With all of these risks and no proof of considerable issues resulting in vaccination, is there really any valid reason why you should not vaccinate yourself or your child? Hotez says, vaccines have saved lives by protecting children and adults from diseases like measles, polio, smallpox, cervical cancer, and whooping cough. And there is no evidence whatsoever that vaccines or a preservative used in flu shots causes autism. As you have listened, I hope you have realized the importance that vaccination serves. Why put not only yourself, but others around you at risk for diseases that can easily be prevented by a simple vaccination? With the doubt in vaccination shortly after its discovery later proved to be false, Andrew Wakefield's fraudulent information that discredited vaccination, and the risks that come with an unvaccinated child, essentially there is no purpose in not vaccinating.